actually is. I won't go into it because it'll bore you. Like, if we were all trading with food or with, something that, iPhones, think that actually have value, now you're going to tie up all of these like real world things that are worth something into people hoarding them to store value, right? Inefficient for the world, inefficient for an economy. So we take something that's not actually worth that much, we make it worth a lot more, right? Socially in this shared hallucination or social pact, and then we use that to transact things of real value. That's how money works. That said, growing a money or monetary network requires an increasing number of users and savers in that monetary network, right? Bitcoin is this very good example of this right now. The whole thing with Bitcoin is get people to convert other forms of money into Bitcoin, and that's how Bitcoin grows, right? I don't think that anyone really, hopefully you understand that if people stop buying Bitcoin, Bitcoin stops getting bigger, right? It requires people entering the system for it to grow. I think like Bitcoin is this like arch example of all of this. So I'm going to use it a lot in the talk. Also, just a preface, anything like this, maybe I would hope that it doesn't come off like I'm trying to criticize Bitcoin, because I'm not at all. I think it's incredible. I think that everything that like might seem illogical is actually very logical. I'm going to make comparisons with Olympus that I think the big thing is, try to point out that if you're going to treat one thing, as this is okay, you're good in one case, you got to be consistent. Either it's both bad, both good, and then coming back to good money is good because of good monetary policy. That's where the distinguishing, factor is, right? Anyways, I think monetary network, in the case of fiat, you can kind of by decree have the network grow, right? Legal tender, you can have like basically, somewhere downstream, the threat of violence is what forces people into this monetary network. When we're dealing with these grassroots bootstrapped currency, like we are in crypto, with Bitcoin, and my argument here is with Ohm now, you need to incentivize people to do that voluntarily, right? You can't force people to adopt Bitcoin, unless like a nation state is going to do the same thing with fiat that it does for like a crypto money. But it's never going to get to that point where they would be inclined to do so unless you've gotten people to join the network voluntarily. So you see this like incentive structure in crypto, which is that if you grow the network, you gain, value from that growth in the network, right? A lot, some portion of the growth of the network is shared with you. That's what incentivizes you to fuel its growth and expand it. Otherwise, no one is going to do so. Not to like pick whatever. There are cases like I think Rye is this really good case of like a non-sovereign unit of account. Very hard time growing because there's no incentive to grow it, right? If there's no incentive to grow it, no one will do so, and so it just kind of stays at like a small state, even though it's cool. Anyways, moving on. Here is why I think that right now there's okay. The irony of cryptocurrency as an industry, right, is that there's really only one cryptocurrency or crypto money. That's Bitcoin. You can maybe make the argument like, oh, ETH or Solana or something. But the thing is, when you look at these layer one tokens, right, if you're going to call ETH money or you're going to call Sol money, then you need to now call Polygon money, and you need to, every single other L1, either they're all kind of money or none of them are, right? Really, I would argue it's more of like a commodity type of thing where you consume it to, transact on the network or whatever. Bitcoin exists pretty purely to be money, right? Fiat exists purely to be money. There's no other use case except them being money. So we call the whole industry cryptocurrency. Really, there's only one of them. My argument is there is now two, but anyways, why Ohm is a complementary and important piece of this puzzle is that Bitcoin came from this counter to centralized monetary policy making, right? If you look at fiat currencies, you can see that millions, billions of people around the world use these currencies. All of the policy decisions for those currencies are made by a very small number of people who generally are not elected, and they do so behind closed doors. They might release minutes, from like bi-monthly meetings, but all the actual decision making is happening outside of the public eye. by unelected and unaccountable individuals, right? So Bitcoin, addresses that and it says, okay, that's not very good. The internet enables us to do better. And that said, the Bitcoin, route to this or response is to just have no monetary policy making, right? So Bitcoin has this strict emission structure, which is that every block new coins are mined, and after a certain number of blocks, there's a halving, and every block after that, the number of new coins is less. But that's it, right? There's no decision making. There's nothing. It's just this static, Ohm is a cryptocurrency or a crypto money that has decentralized monetary policy. This is the real thing that Ohm introduces, and why I think that this has value, and then we can look at what that actual monetary policy is. But you have two extremes here. One of them is very centralized monetary policy decisions. One of them is zero monetary policy decisions. Ohm is in the middle. What if we take that power, instead of destroy it, distribute it to the users and owners of the monetary network, right? Democracy, I guess, versus just like whatever. If you mesh with that, if you don't, that can be a good filter for if this is for you. But I would imagine for most people that actually makes a lot of sense. To me, it makes a lot of sense. It's very intuitive, I think. So let's talk about the monetary policy, right? It all starts with supply. I think that how a lot of people think that Ohm works is like this, right? So third party comes in, they have reserves. They want new Ohm. And so the protocol mints them new Ohm and creates new supply. Really this would look like a, stable coin or a PSM or something where, there's a direct response of demand for DAI mints, new DAI, right? If this were the case, then the whole argument of Ohm should trade at backing would be valid, right? Because third parties can dictate what the supply is. And so, supply will just scale to match any demand in perpetuity. And, it should just trade at its backing. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. You're wrong. How it actually works is this. The protocol decides that it wants to emit new supply, and that is because it wants new reserves. And third parties give it those reserves. It's the other way around, right? The core monetary policy of Olympus is to acquire as many reserves with as little supply as it possibly can, right? It wants as large of a treasury with as few tokens in the market as possible, right? That is the core driving factor of the whole thing. So, how does it do this? When the premium of Ohm, which is the price of Ohm on the market relative to its treasury, is higher, it increases the rate of supply. When the premium is lower, it decreases the rate of supply, right? Demand does influence this, but it's not a one-to-one direct influence, right? It's indirect. Ultimately, the rate of supply is determined by the protocol, and it has no interest in actually satisfying, demand that comes onto the market, right? All it's going to do is adjust up or down that rate of supply, but that's it. Let's compare this to Bitcoin. The monetary policy of Bitcoin is as time goes on and blocks are mined, the supply goes up. With enough blocks mined and time passed, the rate of supply goes down, right? That's it. Having structure, supply only goes up. It's not deflationary. It's decreasingly inflationary. Supply will never decrease, right? It just kind of asymptotically approaches the 21 million mark. So the important thing for both of these is the cost for new tokens, right? If you give away your tokens for free, you're basically implying to the market that the tokens are worthless, and so they will ultimately be worthless. I think that this was a big problem with, liquidity mining rewards, is if you're going to give away your tokens for free, then why should anyone else think that they have value? Clearly you don't, and so, why are other people going to think differently? For Bitcoin, this is what proof of work is, right? Where basically people spend energy and they buy special computers that depreciate over time. They have to get warehouses and whatever, and that allows them to acquire new coins, right? So you have new Bitcoin being given out in exchange for hash power. This is a cost, right? The energy plus computers plus whatever. For the miner, they don't care about spending the energy. They don't want to do that. They don't want to buy the computers. They're spending money to get new coins, right? It's just that those are the steps that they have to take to get the new coins, right? But it's not about the process. It's about the outcome. Versus for Ohm, we call this, I call it proof of reserve. It's not as like branded, I guess, hopefully it becomes so, but, I would call it proof of reserve. And basically you give the protocol reserves and you get new coins, right? So new Ohm emitted in exchange for reserves. In both cases, it's capital, it's cost in exchange for new coins. The only difference is just the form of capital, right? So instead of spending that money on power and on computers and whatever, you just give that money to the protocol, right? But as far as you, the miner, you, the bonder, whatever, you put in X amount of money, you wait for some amount of time, you get new coins out, right? Exact same. So, one thing to throw in here is that hash power, is ephemeral. When you spend that energy or when you consume that energy, the energy is gone, right? The computers over time break down. You have to buy new ones. There's no lasting benefit to the expense of mining new Bitcoin for the Bitcoin network. Whereas reserves are permanent, right? That the reserves go into the treasury, they stay there. That is the big difference in the I would consider improvement of this model, right? Both of them are gating the emissions rate of the supply, right? Again, demand can't just tell the protocol we want this many tokens and get it, right? Same with the proof of work algorithm, right? Difference again is that Bitcoin is static and time based, right? In terms of what its supply is. Ohm is dynamic and it's premium based, right? But in both cases, you're maintaining scarcity because you're forcing people to compete for the new tokens. You're not just saying, you want this much Bitcoin, you want this much Ohm, here you go. The more people that come and mine, the more Bitcoin gets emitted. You're forcing people to compete over them, which is what maintains their value and scarcity. The biggest difference in these two models is, if either had a balance sheet, this is what they would look like, right? For proof of work, it has no assets, right? You're spending energy, that energy is gone. It's not a battery because you're not storing anything. The liabilities are the emitted supply, in the past, for proof of reserve. The assets are the reserves because nothing is spent. They stay there, they retain their value. And the liabilities are also the emitted supply, right? So you just have actual an asset side versus just spending it all and not being left with anything. The beauty of this and the benefit of it is that you can also contract supply, right? So for proof of work, you emit new tokens, you have a supply increase, you can't do anything other than that, right? Supply can never go down, it can only go up, and maybe it goes up at a decreasing rate, but it only goes up. With proof of reserve, now you have this concept of backing, which is that, as a side effect of the supply origination process, there are reserves in the treasury, and you can determine, how much reserves per token and allow that or use that to contract supply as well as expand it, right? So under the condition that, price of token is less than backing, protocol can then burn supply and decrease it, right? Respond to excess demand by contracting the supply. This is what that's looked like since Ohm launched. This is crazy to me. We're going to go into the staking adjusted thing in a second, but basically the supply of Ohm has only increased by something like 4% since it launched. It expanded by about 120% or something in the first 8-9 months. And then, if you didn't notice, everyone and their mom fucking dumped the coin. And the protocol just bought back 50% of it. To the point that now the net emission of the network has been almost zero, right? That said, there's been very tangible growth in the meantime, but as far as supply goes, basically it's emitted nothing in its lifetime on a net basis, right? This is only possible because it can contract supply. This is only possible because it has reserves and it has backing. Just to put it into context, 50% hopefully to you is a big number, but let's equate this to other things that you might be more aware of, right? So 50% of supply is equal to 30 MicroStrategies from the moment they bought Bitcoin to today. I updated this today. They have now 1.67% of the Bitcoin supply, so it's about 30 of them. It's 200 Germany Bitcoin stacks, right? If y'all remember in July, he sold a Bitcoin 30%. That was 0.5% of the amount that the protocol had to repurchase. It's also 100 peak ETH burns. The most contraction that the ETH burn ever did was about 0.5%. So 100 times larger than that. Yeah, big number. Reserves, contracting supply is one way that they can be used, but it's kind of conditional on, people being willing to give the protocol their tokens under backing. So there are additional uses for them. One of them is, we call it cooler loans. You can use that money, you can lend it to them. The worst case is that someone defaults on the loan, and it's like the protocol repurchased those tokens under the same conditions that it would do so anyways, right? So it just lends them out. If they don't get repaid, it's like it just bought back coins. This benefits the capital market for Ohm. Ohm has the cheapest borrowing cost of any asset probably in crypto, and other than MicroStrategy, it's like you're able to access these MicroStrategy loans, but you can be anyone. It's completely open to all. Incredible. Maybe on the next one of these, I will talk about how these scale, because it doesn't scale with price, but it will as a function of third-party behavior and incentives. Protocol can provide liquidity, so it can do this on the market with Uniswap pools. It's been called protocol and liquidity, right? Also, RBS, this wide range system, is another form of liquidity. It's just with a bigger spread, but in both cases, you have the protocol providing liquidity to the market. This helps the market function, right? You can move into it, you can move out of it a lot easier, because you have this protocol liquidity provider that will just sit there and LP forever, right? It doesn't care about opportunity cost. It doesn't care about losing money, whatever. It just, it exists. Olympus exists for Ohm, right? To be the monetary issuer of Ohm, right? So all of these things are in that pursuit. Finally, it can earn yield. I personally consider this unimportant. The point of the treasury is not to generate a return on it. Olympus is not a company. It's not a hedge fund, whatever. But there are cases with the DSR where it's just pure opportunity cost. If you're going to hold DAI, you might as well put it into the DSR. Same risk, now you get yield. Not really optimized for, again, they're reserves are a side effect of supply origination. In both cases, when you compare proof of work, proof of reserve, in both cases, you start with emitting supply, and it's about what the outcome of that is. And the happy side effect for proof of reserve is that you have these reserves. But again, not a hedge fund, not a whatever, not, in my opinion, something to optimize for. My guiding principle is that the safety, stability, and automation of the protocol and the treasury is significantly more important than the productivity of it. So overall, reserves, though, enable monetary policy beyond just emissions. This is the big thing, right? Because you have these reserves, now you can do monetary policy. You can, it's not, your sole lever is not being able to mint new tokens, because that's a very weak lever, right? Now you're able to influence both sides of the market, and that gives you this very, very wide design space for, enacting monetary policy on the money. So we're gonna change gears a little bit. Let's talk about rebasing, right? This is the big one for many of you, right? I think that this is what Ohm and Olympus is most known for. The purpose of rebasing was to shift the growth of the network onto supply instead of price, right? This idea that with Bitcoin, the whole idea is that the price, trends to infinity. With Ohm, it was supposed to be that the price would, always be kind of relatively similar, but that the supply would trend to infinity, right? And that doesn't mean that you're a stable coin where there's no value capture to that. You're just shifting the value capture onto supply. I kind of underestimated the collective IQ, I guess, of people or something, because this has been very hard, I think, to understand. It is what it is, but the point was to keep Ohm, low, more consistent. It was very successful at doing so. It's just probably not worth reinstalling in the future, just because of how misunderstood it was and still is. You can see, I'm going to go into it, but there are just these really, really bad takes that are not rooted in reality, But, when you just glance at it at a surface level, that is the impression you get. Most people don't care enough to give it a second look, whatever, so I don't think it's worth it, because again, all it was supposed to do was shift that growth onto supply instead of onto price. You know, let's show this, right? So this is 2021 on the left here. These like lines are the backing per token, so like the market value, or LB, and then the gray one is like the risk-free value. You can see that these were like, kind of flat, trended up a little bit until like started 2022, and then they devalue a lot. I think that this is the viewpoint that most people look at these things in, but this is not adjusted for staking, right? This is the raw token. So you can actually see that like the token it actually appreciated on like a fundamental level over the course of 2021, even though you had all those crazy staking rewards. When you do adjust for staking rewards, this is what it looks like, which was pretty much fucking up only, which was the point, right? The like market value or liquid backing value did come off the top a little bit. That's because the protocol was providing liquidity, which, is a form of risk. That's why there's this difference between those two. And then, over time, they've kind of converged to the same, because the protocol is not actually assuming any market risk right now. You have to factor in this, right? Which is that if, on day one, you had 1 ohm and you staked like 99.9+% of supply always was, right? Within a year and a half, you had 265 ohm, right? Very, very, those emissions were very real in ohm terms, right? And then, it tapered off, and right now it's like 269, and there hasn't been emissions in like a year and change. But, very, very significant curve. And that's why you have this difference here of these two, right? Is because of that 265x in the number of tokens that you held. Just like, look, they're the same chart, but with this accounted for. If we go back here, right, the purpose was to shift the network growth onto supply. So let's look at how well it did that, right? Was it successful in that? This shows you the orange line is the staking rewards. The blue line is the growth in RFV, right? So the point was to have these be relatively equal to each other. You can see RFV grew significantly more than the staking growth did. If anything, those rewards should have been higher. And you might look at this and say, okay, but like there's this huge line up in April, and that's just like padding all your numbers. So let's just cut that out, start from then. You can see that for basically the entirety of 2021 going into 2022, they were pretty much in lockstep. RFV growth still faster than staking. So again, staking was understated relative to the growth of the network, not overstated. And then, they probably should have turned off in, early 2022 when the network started contracting. There was kind of social barriers that prevented that, whatever. So basically it ended up, from that point in time, emitting 70% more than it should have. But, it was successful and accurate in terms of, measuring the growth of the network onto supply instead of onto price. Again, like understated even. So the infamous ohm price chart, right? Well, let's talk about this one. This is like a favorite of reply guys, and everyone loves this chart for being like, oh, that shitcoin didn't go to zero. This chart's fucking nonsense. It doesn't make any sense because again, you're not accounting for the fact that you received 265 times more tokens in the span of like a year and change. This is what it actually looks like. This also doesn't even include the pre-sale for ohm, but that, puts that starting point down another 10x. These are very different. This is not a bad chart for what it is, because again, 50% of supply, guaranteed dumped on the market in the span of like 1 year, right? The fact that it went down 90% with at least 50%, that doesn't account for like any tokens that someone else bought at that time, adds to that 50%. I would personally estimate that about 80% of the peak supply sold within a year in like 3 months of the top, right? And you saw this, right? Goes down 90%, fucking flatlines. Now we're at the point where in the last 2.5 years, it's regained 250% value with no more than a 12% close to close dip, just fucking up, like literally up only. But if you look at this, you're like, oh, bad, stupid, doesn't make sense. So let's change gears a little bit, shall we? Here is why I think that Olympus is valuable. Bitcoin has shown very clearly that a decentralized and non-sovereign store of value is valuable to the world. As of today, happy 99K day for all who celebrate. That value is being ascribed at roughly $2 trillion. That said, Bitcoin is this very basic economic model, right? It has just a set emission structure with proof of work, and it's a store of value purely because it's treated as a store of value, right? Nothing structurally makes Bitcoin a store of value. You are reliant on other people continuing to treat it like it has value for it to have value. This is not a bash. This is not a criticism. That's how money works, right? But on a structural level, that it is what it is. Some of the monetary attributes that Bitcoin introduced into the scene, so divisibility, portability on the internet, it can't break or whatever. At this point, those are pretty commoditized, right? Like any chain allows you to transfer money across the chain. You can split into Gwei or whatever you want to, store anything in a wallet. So those I wouldn't consider particularly important. Olympus is basically just purpose-built as a store of value economic model. It's got this enhanced liquidity and scarcity as a function of the reserves. It has this buyer of last resort. It's got enhanced liquidity because it can provide protocol and liquidity. It can provide loans to ohm holders. It's able to impose stability and predictability when governance dictates policy to do so, which has been demonstrated to be very, very successful, right? Even at as small of a size as 200 mil market cap, which is not big, right? There's probably thousands of people in crypto that if they wanted to could try to move that market. Anytime they've tried to, it hasn't worked because the protocol is able to just basically impose stability onto the market. It works. By the way, RBS wall fell. It's done. Overall, it's able to regulate its supply, more effectively. By the way, just to be very clear, everything here is a trade-off, right? So I'm not really trying to make an argument of Ohm is better than Bitcoin. That would be dumb. They are different. That said, they're both stores of value. I think that Bitcoin, by having this grassroots movement that has created a non-sovereign store of value, kind of did open Pandora's box, which is that if it can do it, something else can do it. The thing is, it's kind of a meme to act like anything can be better than Bitcoin. But if you look at anything that's actually tried to compete in the past, it's all been this stupid, the chain transaction times are faster, or we have this different consensus algorithm, or, all this kind of I don't know, consensus nerd stuff. No one has ever actually competed on the economic level of, what are the economics of it as a store of value. At this point, we just inherit all the security of ETH, right? Ethereum can worry about the consensus stuff. They can worry about the chain stuff. We can just exist there, right? And focus on being a good store of value. That's one of the trade-offs. There are upsides to that. There's downsides to it. It is what it is. But, as far as on the purely economic basis, right? No one has ever done this, and so I think that open Pandora's box, but you can't just do what Bitcoin did and just have kind of supply. If we all just treat this as store value, we can into existence, right? Bitcoin did that. You got to have an actual differentiating factor and trade-offs that are improvements in some areas that are determined to label for what it is, right? Alternative, I don't see some outcome where it's one winner takes all, this is internet money, but at the same time, there's only one of it. It doesn't actually make sense, I don't think, when you think about it. It's just that nothing else has actually come along that has anything to say, until Olympus and Ohm. Let's talk about scarcity for a second. Right. So again, as I said before, to bootstrap, grassroots currency like this, you need to incentivize people to want to hold it as a money and store of value, right? If there's no incentive to do so, no one will do so. You will never grow. The way to do that is through scarcity, right? The contraction side of the supply structure of Olympus makes it, at times very, very scarce, because supply can deflate, not just or diminishingly inflate. Here's a good example of this, right? If you start, tracking this in like January of 2011, the blue line here is the Bitcoin supply. The ohm line, or orange line here is the staking adjusted ohm supply. You can see that ohm, increased its supply a lot faster than Bitcoin did for its first year, but then contracted it to the point that it is significantly smaller at this point than Bitcoin supply was at the comparable time. Supply can increase again. I expect it to increase again, but doesn't, it can contract in a way that, if you think about scarcity as there's a certain number of coins, yeah. That said, the big one, you're gonna be like, okay, if it's so scarce, then why is it not worth more than scarcity doesn't equal value until there's demand, right? You can decrease the supply side, it doesn't mean anything unless there's equal or greater demand. So that brings me to maybe not brings me, but let's talk about 3-3 for a moment, right? The quintessential Olympus meme. I think that there's a lot of meme coins now that use this term, but no one actually uses it right. It's not just if we all buy and hold the coin, the price of the coin will go up. No duh, but this is fucking dumb, right? Because basically it's not actually if we all buy and hold, the price will go up. It's price going up doesn't mean anything if no one actually liquidates into it. So it's if you all buy and hold, the price will go up and then I can dump on you. That's what 3-3 actually means in most cases to varying degrees of awareness, right? Because the only exit strategy is to defect from that and just hopefully you're the only one to do so right before everyone else chooses to do so. However, unlike other stores of value or tokens or whatever, for Ohm, there's actually a viable strategy where you do never have to sell your coins. When the protocol grows, right, its supply goes up, which allows it to acquire more reserves. That makes the backing go up, and that allows it to loan more to Ohm tokens than it previously did, right? So growth means greater loans. Then when it contracts, it takes those reserves, it decreases supply, which means that your stake in the network goes up. If you had 1% previously, now you have 2%, right? So basically, it gives you this effect where it's like you sold, but you never actually sell your coins. And then it's like you bought, but you never actually had to buy any coins. It just does both of them for you. 3-3 actually means be one with the protocol. It's saying if you just sit there, you can let the protocol do all of this for you, not actually have to do anything, never part with your coins. That is what 3-3 actually means. No one else can use this meme because no one else has these mechanisms and this structure, right? It is a very Ohm specific thing. It does not translate beyond this very high level kind of dumb, hodl kind of meme. Yeah, I mean, there's basically, if you align with the protocol, there's tangible and persistent value captured from that. Basically, the cool thing too is that whatever, I'll move on. Here I was going to talk about, kind of roadmap-y-ish things that I think that we should work on. I'm going to do another one of these next week. We can talk about that kind of stuff. Not really my point for this call. Really, I don't think that anyone understands the system for what it is. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish right now. Next week, we can go into more tangibles. But the big thing is that, the point of this is not fucking build products, right? It's not a company. It's not a DeFi protocol. When is the last time you asked what the roadmap of Bitcoin was? You never did. Most people probably can't even name a single network upgrade that Bitcoin has had. Because it's not fucking important. The whole point point is that this is a money with value. The market is underpricing that value, and over time it will be, it will realize that, and it actually, is kind of self-fulfilling, where the more people believe that, the better it performs, the more people will believe that, the better it will perform, and they just kind of feed into each other. So as far as like, oh, new products, like, there's stuff that we can build. Again, this is like a super big and cool design space, but I think that the actual protocol already exists here, and it's just a matter of like having people understand it. At which point, I think that the game is, kind of said and done. So I'm just gonna do a couple of bonus charts, just for fun. If you recall that like Bitcoin versus Ohm supply chart, here it is again. This is like a price comparison, same time. I would consider them actually following very similar growth trajectories. Here's another one is that, I find this very cool. So everything in crypto is generally some beta of Bitcoin, right? Very high correlation to Bitcoin, where, my like understanding of that is that Bitcoin's the only actual asset in crypto, and so everything just kind of trades against it. You can see that these are all like very high correlations. This is like ETH at the top, and then you have like Avalanche, XRP, Solana, Binance Coin, like I don't know, Doge. Here's Ohm though. Ohm is the one at the bottom. There are times when it's negatively correlated. There's times when it's like perfectly correlated. In the middle here, this like higher correlation is just because the protocol and liquidity pool was switched to ETH, and so it inherited like a lot of ETH behavior by virtue of like low trading volume on Ohm, and so its volatility just became ETH. But on a real sense, right? Ohm trades as its own asset completely, which is very, very rare in crypto. And, my interpretation of that is that, it is its own money as well, right? This isn't just like a Bitcoin beta play. It's its own monetary network itself, which is, very new to the industry. Like this is like the second time it's really ever happened. The last one I have here is just, for like the hedge fund guys. I don't know. I have all these queries on a dashboard. You can look it up. It's Olympus or Zeus/Olympus. A lot of cool stuff on there. I had a lot of fun making them. Super high Sharpe ratio, like crazy high. Pretty unprecedented numbers. Sortino ratio, kind of off the charts. This is also like everywhere past December 2021, like no demand for Ohm. Like all of this is just kind of protocol, being able to fucking turbo bid for a year and a half while everyone dumped all of their coins. And it's still on a, real like measured basis performed incredibly well. It has for the past basically there was like a 4-month period where it poorly performed, but 90% of the days that Ohm has traded has been like fucking crazy good. From there, let's talk about kind of Ohm's appeal. My personal opinion is that it has very high potential as a monetary technology. It also has a resilient community. You can look around. The fact that this number of you are still here, I think is telling for, the fact that the mimetic staying power of this thing is legit, right? This was the biggest thing of 2021. I think that people have really thrown the baby out with the bathwater. You had all these copycats. I can go into this more like what I think went wrong. One of them was really you had all these fucking copycats that took what we were doing and made a mockery of it. But even to this day, people still look at Ohm as this when times were better and that is like the pinnacle that you can strive for as another project, right? It's also deeply liquid. It's very, very good collateral. It has a great credit market through through the cooler loans, as well as I'll talk about this next week, but I'm gonna term them like stacked loans, where there's a very, very strong economic case for a third party leveraging the cooler loans to lend greater amounts to Ohm, right? So whereas the protocol will only lend $10 per Ohm, someone else comes in, they lend 15 because they can borrow from the protocol at 10 and get the cheap interest rate that the protocol is offering, charge a higher rate to the borrower. Don't worry about that. All that is just to say that those loans will scale. It's just that third-party capital comes in to make it scale instead of the protocol itself doing all the work. That is by design. It's just, the premium has been too low for that to work, right? Lenders still want like some lower LTV. So, around now it would work. We're getting there, but it should be cool. It's also, last one, just like predictably volatile or stable, depending on what the policy state is, right? So, in this state of contraction and like equilibrium, we had like the range bound system set up that made it very stable, very low volatility, even though it has grown significantly in that state. In like more of an expansion phase where, like the system is growing, it's going to be more volatile, right? Like nothing moves in a straight line. The protocol can't optimize for growth and try to stabilize at the same time. It's just, it's doing two countering things at once, and it wouldn't work, right? So kind of pick a lane, but at least that's predictable in terms of you can look at what the policy state of the network is and kind of determine with some level of expectation how it's going to behave. Finally, let's just look at like what maturing I think looks like. Ohm is currently way too small to be a real store value or a money. Realistically, like, if it's condemned to this size, like, it's cooked. That said, it has no actual infrastructure, right? So its entire existence, it has traded like only on DEX or decentralized exchanges. It like has never had any OTC desks. It's never had any market makers. It's never had any centralized exchanges with like real trading infrastructure. No perps, no derivatives. As well, it never even got that integrated into DeFi. The root of all of this, by the way, was the rebasing, right? So there were large centralized exchanges that wanted to list Ohm in 2021. I think that it seems ridiculous to think otherwise. The whole issue was, excuse me, the rebasing made it pretty untenable, right? Like, they would have to go and make custom like infrastructure to handle the rebasing, and then they would have to educate all of their users on what the rebasing is, and all this stuff that like it's a lot of work for a coin, right? Alternatively, you offer it without the rebasing, but then your users are getting like wrecked by the fact that like you're supposed to be staked, they're not staked, right? No exchange wants their users to lose money. So, it kind of just became untenable and the listings never happened. But, I think that in the future, should we see kind of the renaissance that I think that Ohm deserves, these things will happen. And, I would actually consider a good thing that they haven't yet because, it's been able to do very fine, without it. I think that the history of Ohm to this point in time is basically doing everything in the hardest possible way and actually doing it very well. From here, I don't see a way that it gets any harder, right? What is the likelihood that we do have a second cycle and after that, again, 80% of supply dumps on the market? Very low, right? Because now that you've seen this play out, from contraction back into expansion, people will act accordingly, right? It will never have as bad of a bear market as it had, so it's cool to look at what that like worst case scenario is. In my opinion, not actually that bad, in general. Like, fucking Solana went down more than Ohm did, from top to bottom in 2022. But even if it were that bad, like, actually, I forgot where I was going with it. Anyways, so, my kind of final pieces here. We're going to revisit the game theory here. Right, there's this piece that I wrote 2021 about the game theory. That's where 3-3 came from. But it was kind of like I should have added it here, like a table where you have 3-3 on one extreme, -3, other extreme. Both of these are strong equilibriums. We've seen that, right? 3-3 was very potent in 2021. -3, very potent 2022 going into 2023. That said, the negative one, the defect and like exit the system is the more unsustainable one. That's the one that can't go on forever. The reason for that is that there's an infinite amount of external capital, but there's only a finite amount of Ohm, right? If people just keep fucking selling their coins, they will run out of coins as they have. Basically, contraction removes all the people that defect, and it leaves only the people that will coordinate. right? If we go back to like what is money, whatever, like at the end of the day, we're memeing a new form of money into existence, and that just comes with coordinating and treating it as a store of value. If you treat it as a store of value for long enough, you get other people to treat it as a store of value, it becomes a store of value. That is how it works. So all those that are unaligned with that, who defect and exit the system, simply get contracted out of the system. Now you're left with only coordinators. If you recall what actual 3-3 is, it's never give up your coins, only coordinate forever, right? And if you have people do that, you actually like really never end up with anyone willing to defect, except when you expand, which is that you're adding potential or like you're adding new coins. Those new coins can defect, but they're permanently growing the network. And then when you can just contract them out again in the future. But like. If you were to have a situation where no one defects except people that acquire the new supply, I don't think you could even ever drop into contraction. Whatever. My point is made. Which brings me to kind of the last thing here. This is the fun part for me, is that by virtue of listening to this, you have entered into a game. You are in a prisoner's dilemma. Basically doing nothing is one of the moves that you can do in this dilemma. If you don't want to be into it, you should probably leave right now. Otherwise, whatever you do is a decision in that game. So let's get into it, shall we? If all outside capital coordinates to fade this, they will win, right? Ohm will not be anything. Basically, you were right to fade it, whatever. That said, because of the fact that it's contracted so much, it is very, very scarce right now, on pretty much all metrics. If a small amount defects, that scarcity will translate into value. That value will translate into growth. That growth most likely leads more to defect. As this goes on, Ohm's perception as a store of value increases, which causes even more to defect. My own opinion is that unless no one defect, or unless unless everyone fades, right? If only some defect, some very small number, ultimately everyone does, right? You've seen this with Bitcoin. I think that everyone likes to think that if they had just been around at the time, they would have bought the $10 Bitcoin, they would hold it to $100,000. It's not true. Most people are not ready, right? Most people need to buy higher, right? They need it to be more established. They need to see that it is going to be this thing, and you pay for it, right? But, it's a good thing, right? So we're in the same scenario, right? Some people are willing to be delusional because it's actually calculated delusion that makes a lot of sense. And basically if you can get enough people to mass hallucinate this thing, it becomes real. So it's a matter of how willing you are to do that determines at what point in the growth of a new money you enter. None of it guaranteed. I really think that the game board is set here, and now it's just a matter of letting people know they're playing a game, at which point kind of the cards will drop. So I'm gonna just leave you with two things. My first one is a call to action to all those who are coordinating, which is 233. I've got a meme for you, which is that finally, my friends, at long last, the day has come. We have the memes, we have the understanding, the technology to turn Ohm into a global store of value. And then my last thing here is kind of a message from the protocol to you, the faders, those who do not believe.
You are alone, child. There is only darkness for you, and only death for your people. These ancients are just the beginning. I will command a great and terrible army. We will sail to 1 billion worlds. We will sail until every light has been extinguished. You are strong, child. but I am beyond strength. I am the end. And I have come for you.